Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. It's very good to see all of you today. Yes, it is. So let's review just for a couple of minutes this morning and then get into the things we're going to talk about today. On Wednesday, I had asked you guys, if you were here, to look over the questions that were at the end of the chapter, which we typically have not really been doing. But I felt like these were worth our time to look at and to discuss a little bit. I also have a couple of other things that are not in the book that I want to try to discuss and see what we can get. But over the last couple of classes, we have been talking about the idea of not being persuaded and what that means, and that we know that we can deal with imposters in the world around us, and not just out in the world, but within the body of God's people as well. And what that looks like, what that can mean for us, how do we combat that? How do we deal with that? Being aware where we are so we see that when that occurs in our lives, when that comes up, how do we face it? As we've gone through the book, we've talked multiple times about what it means to be a disciple and what true discipleship should be, what that should mean, what that should look like. And we've talked about, just some warnings that we can have, that God has given us. And we ended on Wednesday night really looking at the idea of how much truth matters. That is ultimately what's important. We've talked several times over the quarter about the idea of, especially culturally now, we have I have my truth, you have your truth. Well, what is the truth? That's the truth that we need to worry about. That's the truth that we need to have at the center of our lives and make sure that we are fully aware of that. So I want to start with looking at the passages that we ended with on Wednesday night, just to kind of get that in our minds as we look at some of the questions we're going to look at today. So turn to Ephesians chapter 4. We're going to read verse 21 again. All right. And then, Ben, would you turn to John 8 and be ready to read 31 and 32? So let's look at Ephesians 4, and we're going to look at 20 and 21. But you have not so learned Christ, if indeed you have heard him and have been taught by him as the truth in Jesus, that you put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness, as the truth is in Jesus. It can't be said more simply than that. All right, and then let's look at John 8, verses 31 and 32.
So Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed him, if you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free.
I think these verses, in addition to telling us about truth and what truth can do for us, also gives us that sum up of a disciple. If you abide in me, you are my disciples. There's no other way. We can't be a disciple of Jesus if we don't abide in him. If that is not the center of who we are, if that's not the core of who we are, we're not his disciples. It's truly that simple. One of the things that we talked about on Wednesday night was spirituality, religious, being religious, looking religious. Why do you think, and I'm thinking about this from a cultural standpoint, but I also want us to think about this question in regards to within the body of Christ. So we're going to look at this from two different perspectives. So we talked about what it looks like to be religious. I think so much in our culture, especially when you look over the last 3 to 4 years, has changed. And I'm gonna go back. We'll go back to COVID. We'll blame COVID because I think COVID changed our perspective on a lot of things in a lot of ways in a lot of areas of our life. Going from something that was an unknown to knowing a lot more to where we are today with that. But I think that did impact our culture in looking religious. Why do you think so many people out there want to look religious? Or do you think many people out there want to look religious?
Usually when you want to appear a certain way, you're wanting to fit in some way. It's usually the driving factor.
Okay.
I think most people in the world want to fit in with the world. I don't know, it's kind of hard to figure out why someone would, if they're not truly seeking God, why someone would want to try to fit into the church. I don't know why someone would want to do that, but apparently there are people who are not seeking God, but they want to fit into the religious community.
Sure. Kaylee.
I feel to go along with that, if you look at us as a culture, I think 90s, early 2000s, it was very in to be religious. Like you had the what would Jesus do, you had the Jesus freaks. I can't remember that side of time frame. But now I feel like it's swung the other way, and there's so many people who are anti-religion. And so to fit with that, like I think whatever's kind of the path, that kind of dictates what most people are wanting to be perceived as.
Sure. Joe, and then Joe.
I think, in addition to that, I think being spiritual was very popular, which is very different from being religious.
Sure, absolutely.
Because being spiritual means, okay, I believe there's more to life, I believe there's maybe potentially some kind of supernatural stuff going on, but it allows me the freedom to look at it in the way that I want to look at it without any boundaries, because as soon as I'm religious, that means I'm identifying to a certain rule set, and that's kind of a box that I don't want to be in.
Sure. I think that kind of goes along with the idea that we brought up on Wednesday of the people that say, well, I'm a Christian, but I'm not really very religious. That kind of, how does that work? Joe?
There does seem to be like religious trends, so to speak, through different times, in the 70s, which some may not remember that, but there were the Jesus freaks, those that were just peace out, and they're all about Jesus, in their way and in their form. And they made a statement. They were trying to make a statement, and they did make a statement. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but they were trying to make a statement. And then, you fast forward that all the way till now, you still have some who are trying to make a statement by being religious, in whatever way that may be. But it seems to me now that the idea of religion is very, very broad, where it wasn't that many years ago when people had their religion, their faith that they followed, and they were dedicated to that faith. And now it's very flat. If you claim Christianity, well, that could be any kind of Christian faith.
Sure.
And everybody is okay, in that circle. And there's no distinction in so many ways, one church to another, where it wasn't that many years ago there was distinction in that way. But But I think maybe now to your point, you know, Scripture makes a distinction that is very different than what society is doing today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when, to your point, I think there has to be an emphasis here on truth. You said truth matters. And I think that's something you have to stop and think about for a minute here. The idea that truth matters. You know, because in many religious discussions with people, it becomes evident very quickly that they're concerned about what they believe, their faith, may believe that they're right, very often won't even engage in serious Bible discussion because, as you said, well, I mean, that's your truth and I have my truth. And truth is not that way. I mean, something is true or it's not.
Or it's not. Yeah.
But how do you make that distinction? Well, the passages that were just read a moment ago help to make a distinction. You know, that truth is from God, truth is in Jesus, truth is in His Word. And so if we are basing our truth on any other matter besides what God's Word says, then it's not true. And that doesn't fly well today when you have discussions with people. You know, people get uptight really quick if you try to defend Bible truth and it's different than what they believe. Man, people get crossways right away. And it's like, who are you? Who are you to say that? You know? And maybe sometimes you're just turning to, well, I didn't say it. I mean, Jesus said it. And sometimes that doesn't even mean anything. And so I get a little perplexed sometimes at how to even deal with that.
Sure. You know, I think that goes so much with, you know, the idea of Christianity, and we've talked about that. What is a Christian? You know, how we use that word Christian within our culture. We have gotten so generic that if you get too specific, people are going to run from that. You know, if we can keep it general, we can keep it generic, we can kind of keep it surface, well, that's okay. But if we dig a little deep, if we kind of plow forward, well, that's getting to be too much. You know, I don't want to commit to that. You know, and that's the thing. Christianity, being a Christian, is a commitment. There's nothing generic about being a Christian. You know, if we are truly following God, we are committed. We are all in. All right? I'll tell you, some of you will have heard me go to this passage many times, and I'm sure I will for the rest of my life, but I want us to look at this in how it looks at our life. Turn to Proverbs chapter 3. You know, one of the things that we did in leading off this lesson, this particular lesson of Don't Be Persuaded, was talking about things that challenge our faith. You know, things that can cause us to struggle, things that may cause us to stumble, and how that can impact our faith, how that can impact our life. Read with me Proverbs 3, and I'm going to read 5 through 8. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. What does that look like in your life right now? What do these verses look like in your life? You know, that's something that I have thought a lot about over the last few weeks as we've gone through this. You know, these are verses that I've said many times. I can apply these to so many areas of my life. I can apply these in so many ways to how I live. I've said for a long time that these are my favorite verses in the Bible. I think a lot of us have like a little set of verses that we tend to go to. I've called them before my go-to verse. This is something that I can go to when I may be struggling. I think in thinking along the lines of just how we've been talking, we all have our struggles. We all have our temptations. That I even sent out an email to get everybody to think about that. And I did that recognizing, this may not be the setting to really talk about something deeply personal. This may not be the environment that we would get into something truly deep, something truly personal that each of us struggles with. We all have our struggle. We all have our temptation. We all have, maybe that thing that feels like an extra burden in our life. And when I look at these verses in relation to that and how that thing can persuade me, how that temptation can cause me to stumble. And I think a lot of times if you have something that you have struggled with, I have, that thing that I have struggled with for most of my life. That thing that can get in my head, can get in the way of my life and take me down a path that I don't need to go down. I think that when that happens, am I trusting in the Lord with all of my heart? Does that thing, that situation, that whatever it is, prevent me from trusting like I need to? And that can be taxing. That can wear you down after a while. And am I coming back to this and putting my trust, putting my faith where it needs to be so that when those times do come up, I'm where I need to be. I can use that trust, use that faith to propel me forward instead of persuade me down another path that I may be looking at, that I may be tempted to go down. Haley.
Whenever I'm dealing with health issues, it can be easy to get wrapped up in the science and the labs and what the doctors are saying, and it's always helpful to come back to this and just kind of gives me more peace that God's in control here. I have this information, but ultimately He's the one that's in control.
Yeah, absolutely. Any thoughts, questions, whatever, up to this point? Yeah, Joe.
I think that at the core of a lot of issues in our culture, and even personally, we have a very difficult time submitting to the idea of an authority, and that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you're talking about trusting the Lord, following Him, that requires us to submit. In some cases, it requires us to say, okay, this is what He teaches, and it's not what I would want to do, but I'm a disciple of Christ, so I'm going to submit to Him and follow what He says. And that's just something that's very difficult for us to do, I think, especially in today's culture.
Absolutely.
I think we also get really caught up on us being in control with every situation that we're in. It's just a really big part of society. It's more now than it used to be. But I know for me, I have a year left of school, and the thought of not knowing what is next after this, honestly, this book is closing. I've been in school for 5 years, and it's closing, and I don't know what's next. I have a lot of things to figure out, and these verses always seem to just be okay, I'm not the one in control here. I'm going to pray about what I need to, and then I'll be guided to what's best.
Sure. I think that's very relevant. I think a lot of us like that idea of being in control, being, the one that is guiding where we're going. And we're not. And that can be very difficult. That can be very challenging to realize that, and to accept that, but have the faith and put that faith where it needs to be.
Some people are control people. They want to just be in control of everything in YouTube and stuff like that. Most people aren't like that, but to that degree. But yeah, we do want to be in control of our own lives. And I think some things said here is interesting, because I think we all relate to. We get worried about what does the future bring and all of those kinds of things, and we want to have control in our life. In fact, many of us have grown up being told, well, you can do whatever you want, you can be whatever you want to be. And while there is truth in that we can choose who we want to be, I think sometimes that's been taken to a whole nother level. That it's like, bringing this back to the religious realm, it's like, man, you don't like what you hear in a church? Go to a different church. Or start your own. You can make church be whatever you want it to be. And that's kind of where I've seen some of this control thing go. So like now we should be in control of spiritual things. I think it's gone there. At least in the minds and the hearts of many. Make church be what you want it to be. And boy, that is so opposite of what we're reading here in this text and some others, that lean on God's understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Question 4, that's at the end of this lesson. What are some of the biggest factors persuading people away from Christ? All right. And the follow-up to that, who is ultimately responsible for this? Looking at the room right now, even within this room, we have it, and I think of Jake now every time I say this. I'm going to use Jake's most hated expression right now. We have several different seasons of life in this room right now. When you think of the biggest factors persuading people away from Christ, we could have several different answers right now and here, because of the different seasons of life that we're all in. So what do you guys see? What do you face daily that you say that is a factor that could persuade me away? That is a factor that could persuade others away from Christ.
I would say the first thing that comes to my mind is material things. Just especially, we live in great prosperity, which there's nothing in itself wrong with that, but we got to be really careful that we don't get so caught up in just things. We have so much, and we have to be very careful not to let that distract us.
Sure. Think about it. Is it easy to be a Christian when you have everything that you need? When you have most of the things that you want? When there's not a whole lot of struggle going on in your life? I can't help but think about a lot of the people Joe knows, over in Africa, in different places. A lot of us know, some folks in South Africa. What a different way of life than we have here. So does that mean we have it easy? Or do they have it easy? Okay, go.
Because I feel like sometimes they definitely have the upper hand in things because they are very blessed with the things that they do have. We are very blessed with what we have, but we take it for granted. And sometimes I feel as if that, so it's okay. When they need to do that, so their mindset is so different than ours in America. And I think that has a very big deal of what and how they believe, too, of the things, because if you have everything that you want, well then, what more do I need? But if you don't have everything that you want, then you're going to look for something that is going to be bigger than just your material things.
Sure, absolutely.
Piggybacking off of that, I think there's the busyness culture in America bites us a lot of times. Because it's not, we've fought that battle, especially on like Wednesday nights, when I was still teaching and he was in the office and we had little kids. Like, Wednesdays are not convenient when you have a 35-minute drive and then it's an hour and a half past bedtime and all the things. So there's always something else. Well, I could be doing this, I could be doing this. It's not always convenient.
I think that's very real. But I think that's so important. I'm so glad you brought that up, Megan. Because I think it's so important to realize with little kids, what are we teaching our little ones? We think, oh, well, they're babies. Oh, well, they're not in school yet. They're not in whatever. Do we stop and think and realizing we're forming those habits? We're teaching them important lessons right from the get-go. It's not easy when you have that 35-minute drive. Is it important? Is it necessary? Is it teaching them and leading them on their faith journey down the path toward heaven? We need to realize those lessons start that young. And we may not have always been in a position where we were able to learn them that young. But there's so much value in it when we do know that truth, when we know the truth, that are we teaching our little ones, are we teaching our babies from the beginning, it's worth that drive on Wednesday night. It's worth being with my brothers and sisters in Christ, to be encouraged, to be taught, to be together. All of those things that we talked about as we talked about fellowship and what that really means. Joe, you were...
I think what Megan said is really important, that I think it's probably less common to have like this pivotal moment where you decided, I'm just going to reject my faith. I think it's more of a very gradual, slow, incremental process that comes from busyness. Just your life, you fill it up so much, and it gets to the point where the spiritual stuff just gets pushed out. And then eventually you look up, you're like, wow, I pretty much left it all behind.
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right, material things, busyness. Joe.
I'm going to throw one more thing out here on this. All of these points are right. But still trying to get down to just the bottom line. What is the issue? What is it that would keep us from serving Christ? What would persuade us to walk away from His will? And I'm wondering what role humility plays in this, or lack of.
Okay.
The willingness to serve Him. That what He would want of us and how He would want us to be and to live. Does that concern us enough? That we would deny ourselves our own issues, pleasures, whatever it may be. Jesus demonstrated humility time and again. If we try to describe the life of Jesus, we try to describe His character, somewhere in that description we're going to talk about humility. Because it is, His character.
Yeah.
And He has tried to teach us humility too. We deny self, those principles. In humility, submit to God, James chapter 4. If we don't have that as part of our character, we're going to struggle with all of these other things.
Absolutely. We've talked some... Oh, yeah, Lydia.
I was going to say, I agree with Joe. I think, in my opinion, the number one biggest issue is pride. you know, truth matters when it's convenient for you. You know, people who sometimes will say, you know, well, you can't know truth. Well, if you don't give them their paycheck and they say, well, I work for that. I'm like, I don't know, that's your truth, that's not my truth, you know? So they believe in truth then. But when it comes to the Bible, oh, well, I can't know that that's true. We can't really know truth. But really, deep down, what I believe is that they know that they acknowledge this as the truth, then that means that they would have to follow it. That means that they would have to submit their lives to what this book is saying, and they don't want to. They want to do what they want to do. And they won't admit that, or maybe they don't realize that's what it is, but I believe that's what it is. It's your pride, because people want to be their own God. If God is not your God, then you are your own God. And that is just full of pride, and there's no humility in it.
That was awesome. Yes. Yes. That right there. You know, like I said a few minutes ago, Christianity is a commitment. You know, that means having that willingness to submit, having that willingness to say, God, you lead my life. I am stepping back. I am taking the back seat. You know, you have to be the one to guide me and lead me on that journey, because I can't do it. You know, and that's not always easy for us. That can be a challenge. But when we see it, when we read it, when we understand it, we need to commit. We need to take that step. All right. Let's look at question 5. What are some practical ways to take your stand for Christ? What can you do to show God you are not ashamed? Turn to Joshua chapter 1. Let's start. Let's start in verse 5 through 9. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage. For to this people you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Thinking of that, and then thinking of our question, what are some practical ways to stand for your faith?
Praying that word, like before you eat lunch.
Yeah. You know,
Proclaiming him to others.
huh?
Planting seeds even when it's hard.
Okay. You know, praying, planting seeds. professing him to others. You know, you think, are those always easy things to do? You know, are there times we're scared to do that? Are there times that we're afraid, we're nervous, we're concerned? You know, we've said many times, you know, as people of God, we need to be praying people. Do we always do that? I mean, do we have times that we're concerned about doing that because, oh, how's that going to look? You know, or, you know, oh, what are they going to think of me? You know, or, you know, so many things.
The way we talk, not just the words we use, but also how we talk about others when they're not there. Is, you know, are we engaging in gossip? Are we being encouraging, uplifting in the way that we talk? You know, has a big impact on how people look at us.
You know, Michael, when was the Be Salt and Be Light? How long ago was that?
That was my very first year of camp. So that was 11 years ago.
Okay. You know, that was one of the best shirts that I think kids ever got at camp. You know, so simple. Be salt, be light. Sums it up. Are we? Are we that light? Are we that salt? You know, do we be those things? You know, that's, you know, we say it, we read it, but do we do it? You know, do we, is it inconvenient to be salt and be light? It can be. It may not always be convenient for us. But do we stop and think, that's a responsibility we have. That is a command we have been given. You know, and when I think about that, that takes the choice out of it for me. I am to be salt and I am to be light to the world around me. You know, if I'm not doing that, am I being obedient? Am I being the disciple that I need to be?
The consistency in all of these things that have been mentioned, I don't think we can emphasize too much. The idea of being a light unto the world. You know, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, remember the last part of that, to bring glory to God.
Right, yes.
You know, it's like, get over your bad self. You know, it's not about us. You know, if we are salt and light as we should consistently over time, people see that in us. It's not like you have to like raise a flag saying I'm a Christian. You know, that's demonstrated in our lives. And in time, people will see that, and they will appreciate us for it, or they may not. But in the end, ultimately, it is God that gets the glory in that. And I think sometimes we need to put a little more emphasis on that, and that may help us in our walk.
Absolutely.
If we think about, you know, and understand that it's God's glory. It's to give glory to Him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you, everybody. For Wednesday, so we have Wednesday, Sunday, Wednesday. That's all we have left for the rest of this quarter. So for Wednesday, be ready to get into chapter 13, and we will start there on Wednesday night. All right? Thank you so much, everyone.